Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by Stephen Moore here at Freedom Fest, and it's a pleasure to meet you, sir.
Pleasure to meet you.
Great. I mean, you've been considered a major Fed critic. You were in the contention for the Federal Reserve, and I wanted to ask you, in the past you criticized the Fed about raising interest rates, and I wanted to ask, now there's a really real possibility that we will see interest rates drop. What do you think that's going to lead to when a lot of people are concerned about negative interest rates?
Well, first of all, I feel somewhat vindicated because I've been saying for months and months and months we have to cut rates, and now it looks like the Fed is finally going to take my advice. If you look at what's happening in prices, the Fed has been below its inflation target now for 4 or 5 months in a row. Commodity prices have been falling, and we have a economy that is booming where there's a big demand for dollars. And the Fed, I think, the bigger concern than inflation right now is inflation, and so I'm in favor of 25 or 50 basis point decline, and I think that's what we're going to get later this month. And I think that's a very positive development. There's no reason this economy can't be growing at 3 to 4% per year, and it's slowed down to 2%, in no small part because the Fed has been too tight.
Well, there's been a lot of concern regarding the possibility of negative, considering back in 2008 to 2012, a lowering of interest rates.
The reason interest rates are so low and you've got an inverted yield curve is because that's an indication that people think that there's going to be no inflation and, in fact, deflation. So this is actually a cure for negative real interest rate. And let's not forget, interest rates in the economy are set by the supply and demand for credit. They're not set by the Fed. The Fed's job is to keep prices stable. And my point is prices in many areas have been falling and the Fed has been too tight. So, by the way, low interest rates is a wonderful thing. I mean, gosh, when I was a kid, there were 20% mortgage interest rates. Can you imagine trying to buy a house when you had 20% mortgage interest rates? So now, you're going to be able to tell your grandkids there was a time you could get a mortgage with less than 4% interest. It's a very positive thing for the economy.
Well, you mentioned the inverted yield curve, and we saw the data between the 10-year and the 3-month, and a lot of people were concerned that, hey, in the past, this seems to point to a recession.
No. What the inverted yield curve is an indication of is deflation, right? Why would somebody lend money, at a lower interest rate over 5 years than over 2 years? And the only answer is because they think prices are going to fall, not rise. And so that is the explanation for why, whenever you have an inverted yield curve, that's an indication of deflation, not inflation.
Okay, so over the past 10 years, a lot of people would say, and we've talked with a good friend of Donald Trump's, Robert Kiyosaki, recently, and he basically put it in the sense that the economy is basically being propped up on paper, and it's just being printed. It's debt-based, it's fake, and that the Federal Reserve System is basically propping up a fake economy, and that we've kind of been in a depression since 2008, essentially just papering over it. What do you think to critics that say this?
Well, 72% of the American people now rate the economy as good or great. We've got a surplus of jobs, for the bigger surplus of jobs than any time in American history. Wages are rising. There's almost nothing to point to in the economy that's not positive right now. So I don't buy that argument at all. And by the way, if people think, this is all built up by debt, we're going to have a big debt crisis and we're going to, somehow have a, explosion of not being able to pay our debts off, then why would people be, buying 10-year Treasury bills at 2% interest rates? It just doesn't add up. People are not worried about the debt. If they were, they wouldn't be lending the government money at 2% interest rates.
But isn't the Fed, doesn't it have a $0 trading desk on Wall Street, and isn't it buying?
The Fed can't manipulate the market. The market is hundreds of millions of actors. They're the ones who determine the direction of the economy, not the Fed. The Fed is a follower of interest rates. It's not and by the way, I believe the Fed should be just targeting keeping the prices of goods and services stable, and not have to, when people say, well, we should have a normal interest rate. Who knows what a normal interest rate is? In the 1970s we had 15, 16, 17% interest rates. Now we have 3 or 4% interest rates. How can we possibly even know what a normal interest rate is? If you got stable prices and you have high employment and you have rising wages and the lowest unemployment rate 50 years, that's a pretty damn good economy.
Okay, and we're seeing places like Australia lower interest rates pretty dramatically dramatically from down to 1.5 and then to 1. We're seeing Britain talk about this as well. But at the same time, you mentioned the employment rate, but how much of that accounts for the labor force participation rate, which I know a lot of numbers are kind of hidden in there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the labor force participation rate needs to get up. We need to, so we need to fix our welfare programs to require people, if they want to get welfare, to work for those benefits. And because there are, by my estimates, about 10 million people on the sidelines in the United States that could be and probably should be working but aren't. And so you raise a good point. Our next big, now that we've got wages up, now that we've got the lowest unemployment rate, there's no, in other words, anybody who wants a job can find a job. Why are we giving people food stamps and free health care and free housing and all these things and not requiring them to work in exchange for it? And also, as wages rise, hopefully you'll see more people entering the workforce because it's more attractive to work.
Yeah, and while everyone's asking for higher wages, I think inflation definitely has something to do with the wage situation right now. And I think people are kind of looking to that problem reaction solution kind of aspect of this. Like, the government needs to give us free things, and obviously nothing's free, and we know that. But I wanted to ask you one final question before we go. A lot of people have been talking about Bitcoin, especially in the last couple of years. And do you think Bitcoin poses a threat to the U.S. dollar long term?
Well, I just became a board member of a cryptocurrency called Decentral, and Decentral is another one of these crypto. So I'm a big believer that these private alternatives to government fiat money is a very positive thing. Bitcoin is an example of that. The problem with Bitcoin is its price goes up and up and up, and down and up and down. That what you want from a currency is stability in price. But it tells you a lot that the price of Bitcoin has been going up a lot in the last 6 to 9 months, and that means there's a loss of confidence in government currencies. And I think the government central banks having to compete with private currencies is a very positive development. I think it'll be a disciplining effect. And by the way, if you believe in privacy and if you want to be able to make transactions without the government knowing what you're doing, then I think these private currencies and private money are a very positive development.
Well, then I can't let you go without asking then, with Donald Trump recently saying on Twitter that the U.S. dollar is the greatest and that Bitcoin's criminal money and stuff like that. I have to ask, I mean, when you see something like that, the U.S. dollar has lost most of its purchasing power over the years, and we know that, going back to Nixon taking the U.S. off the gold standard. But Bitcoin has gone up, 24 million % since its inception. So, I mean, which one is really printed out of thin air and fake?
Well, we'll see. I mean, the dollar's been very stable now for the last 20 some years. It's been our inflation rate has been in that 2 to 4% sweet spot. I think it's been a little too low lately. But look, the dollar is still the world currency, and we have a big advantage over all the rest of the world. Whenever there's a major problem in the world, everybody rushes to dollars. So we have an advantage over all our competitors that, it's considered the safest and most stable currency in the world, and I want to keep it that way.
So no concern over the swapping by multiple countries around the world out of the U.S. dollar, because there's been quite a few countries that have been swapping.
What do you mean by swapping?
Swapping out of the U.S. dollar using different currencies as their
Certainly
stand.
not showing up in the value of the dollar. The value of the dollar has been rising. It hasn't been falling. So no, I think the dollar is a very stable currency, and I think I'd like to see a rules-based monetary policy where we take discretion away from the Fed and announce to the American people what the policy is and follow that policy.
Well, I appreciate your time today, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good luck to you.
Like what you see here at WHAM, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we're so heavily demonetized and censored and shadow banned. It's getting really bad, folks. If everyone just gave $1 single a month to, say, Patreon or our Subscribestar, where we do subscriber-only content, we could really get out of this rut that we are currently in as YouTube tries to stifle independent media and prop up the mainstream media. This is really important. This is one of the most important times in independent media history for us to say it's now or never. Let's keep moving forward and let's be that change that we wish to see in the world. Of course, there's also our Bitcoin address below as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And of course, we got events coming up. So make sure to check us out at anarchovegas.com. Anarchovegas.com. Use promo code WAM, that's WHAM, for a 10% discount on your tickets. It's on July 19th, 20th, and 21st. And of course, Las Vegas, Nevada. That's anarchovegas.com. Make sure to check us out there and find us on websites like BitTube and Minds, and just try to support independent media if not myself, any of the other big independent medias out there to help us continuously bring our message to you free of charge so that we can really change the guard as we move forward into a dramatically polarized, crazy future. Let's try to make it as sustainable as possible. It comes down to you guys. You are the change you wish to see. You guys will help us get through these tough times. So anyway, check out all those links. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Bye.